And thank you everybody for being here tonight. I have a relationship with every single one of you. So it's a comfortable way to get kicked off here in Little Rock. I spoke up in Tacoma, Washington for about 5 years from 2015 to 2020. Did a TEDx talk up there. And I really never had a room where I had so much familiarity with people. So it's nice to start this way in Little Rock. So I really appreciate y'all being here. And just to dive right in, like the title on your handout that you have says, the most important skill in life. Again, if you all will go to that QR code, or you can just go to travisdaigle.com if you've got your phone with you. If your neighbor doesn't have their phone, like maybe share with them a little bit. But there's an image on my website. If you just go to that home page and scroll down a little bit, there's just a before and after image. And there's me when I think January 2000, I'm in a blue shirt. I weigh over 300 pounds in that picture. And then there's me as about 10, 12 years later as a U.S. Army Green Beret. And what we're going to talk about tonight is the process and the principles I learned in that process of making that transformation, and what I call the most important skill in life, which is personal ownership. And I define personal ownership as taking responsibility for our actions, beliefs, and our overall direction in life. And I fundamentally believe that if you learn to implement this in your life, it's going to lead to what some might call character development, grit, resilience, self-awareness, and other things as well. But the main thing here, and the theme that I'm going to try to get you all to tease out a little bit as I go through the different stories and the different principles, is it's important that we be able to feel our emotions, but at the same time not be dominated by our emotions, but be able to see through how we feel in particular moments and still stay focused on what it is we want out of life. That's kind of the main theme here. And I'll go deeper into why I argue this is the most important skill in life in the end, and it'll kind of come out in the stories. But to start us off with principle number 1, action over time. And I say, and this is a common phrase, if it's worth having, it's worth fighting for. Now, here's what I say in my book to kind of explain a little bit deeper. Any significant goal that we have in life will most likely take a significant period of time to achieve, if we can achieve it at all. And in any significant period of time, every single one of us is going to encounter obstacles or adversity of some kind. It can be related to the process, related to that goal that we have or that change we're trying to make, or something that blindsides us that we just don't expect. And the key is we cannot control time, but we can control our actions relative to time. And if we persist, then maybe opportunities present themselves that accelerate our progress. But nonetheless, if it's worth it to you, success or not, I say you keep fighting for it. Now, to help you understand where I got that from, I have to go explain to you some things about my mother's life and about my older sister when I was growing up. So my mother grew up in Houston, Texas, and she grew up watching her father physically and emotionally abuse her mother. And when she left that home, eventually she ended up with the man who would become my sister's father, and he ended up being both physically and emotionally abusive as well. And eventually she escaped that situation, and some years later she met the man who would become my father. And while not abusive, he just ended up being absent. And so in 1982, when I was born, my older sister was 9 years older. You've got my mom. She's got 2 kids, 2 different dads. Neither one of them is in the picture. And whenever I tell this part of the story, I always like to ask people, how do you think she felt? And so if you had some one-word answers that you just shout out, how do you think she felt? Overwhelmed, conflicted. What else? Sad. Yeah. I think she didn't know it at the time. You know, it's the early 80s. PTSD wasn't something that people talked a lot about, to my knowledge back then. And I think she was struggling with PTSD. And what that played itself out as is a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming in the home, lots of whippings at the time for seemingly the most minor infractions from me and my sister. And my sister being older, she tended, I think, to bear the brunt of that energy. Unfortunately, because my mom, single mom, trying to make it work, she was out of the house a lot working. So my sister and I spent a lot of time alone. And what that meant is that I kind of bore the brunt of my sister's frustrations in the form of physical and sexual abuse when I was growing up in the house. Now, I don't tell you those things to put my mother or my sister on trial. Like I said, I think my mother was struggling with PTSD, and I think my sister was a child, and she didn't know what she was doing, I think, in a lot of ways. But I do share that to kind of articulate the stress of the environment that I was growing up in. And what that equated to, ultimately, is, well, let me ask y'all, what do people do in response to stress? What are some of the behaviors that people do in response to stress? I'm like 2, 3, 4 years old. What do I have access to? Food. I started eating, right? And so I started eating a lot. And from as early as I could remember, I was always one of the heavier kids in class. And the way I did, because of my physical appearance, I got bullied and teased a lot in school. And I think this has changed in present times, because when I talk to kids about this stuff, I don't think bullying is as normal as it was back then. But back then, I mean, like daily, you're fat, you're slow, you're stupid, we don't want you on our team, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I describe it as, I describe my childhood like, it's like I was being bullied at home and bullied at school. And as I got to 5th grade, about 10 years old, I started to become more aware of kind of the way I felt in contrast to, let's say, my classmates. And in particular, what I noticed is that I seem to move through the world. I have words for it now, but then I didn't know how to describe it. I just would have described it as being scared of other people, afraid of other people. I think I was just anxious all the time. And so it was like I was like kind of walking on eggshells, kind of always like paying attention to how does my behavior cause other people to react to me, is a lot of the way I moved through the world. And I didn't like that, because I just wanted to be freer, like what I perceived in other people. And so I made a decision. It was 1992, I was 10 years old, and I just promised myself, either I'm going to figure out how to lose this weight, or I'm going to die trying. Those are literally the words I remember saying to myself. And I begged my mom for a weight set that Christmas. She got it for me. So Christmas 1992, December 25th, 1992, I got the weight set. It was a Joe Weider weight set, the old plastic mold weight sets. I put it together that morning, and I started working out that day. And I just had a real simple strategy, because I'm 10 and I don't know anything. Just work as hard as you can for as long as you can, as often as you can. I figured the more I work out, surely the faster the weight goes away. And of course, that proved to be wrong. I would work out 5-6 days a week, particularly in the summertime. The summertime still has a special connotation for me, because during the summertime, I would just 3-4 hours a day working out on top of whatever, cutting grass or any outdoor chores I had. So I would just kind of put myself through these really hard regimens. And I also struggled to change my diet. And I knew I needed to cut back on junk food, but I just couldn't for some reason, I felt like I couldn't quite cut back on the junk food. And for 7 years, obviously part of it is I'm 10 years old going to 17, so I'm going through puberty. Obviously you're going to get larger, but because I was struggling so much with my diet, I just got heavier and heavier until the point I was 305 pounds. And that picture you all saw on my website, it was my senior year in high school. And I was in the final semester of my senior year in high school, and I was 305 pounds. And something interesting happened that semester. But before I tell you about this interesting thing, what I want to ask you is to think about is when you're in a situation where you're chasing something that you really, really, really want, and the process isn't giving you anything, any positive reinforcement, let's so to speak. So year over year, I'm working out as hard as I can, trying to lose this weight. And one of the hardest parts about that scenario was going back to school at the end of a summer and then going back to my classmates and going right back to being, you're fat, you're ugly, you're slow, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I want to ask you all is, how might you feel about exercise or working out or trying to lose weight if that's the cycle that you're going through?
I think you'd end up with a fixed mindset.
A fixed mindset of like, I can't grow, I can't outgrow this. Fair. This feels impossible. And that's interesting because I didn't think about that when I was preparing for this, Rolly, but that's a very good point. It's something I bring up to people when we talk about weight loss, the need to get wins right away to feel some sense of momentum. Now, I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just going the opposite direction. But what I kept focusing on, because the word I like to use is demoralized. It was demoralizing. And every time I felt that feeling, what I would do is I would recall the commitment that I'd made to myself. Okay, figure out how to lose the weight or die trying. Now, die could have been at 15 years old or it could have been at 75 years old. And I just set that in my mind. So I'm going to keep moving forward every single day, no matter what happens. Well, what happens in that final semester of my senior year is interesting because suddenly I'm able to change my diet in some significant ways. I stopped drinking soda, I stopped eating sweets, stopped eating fast food, stopped eating fried foods. And between January of 2000 and August of 2000, because I'm already working out hard, right? I've already developed this habit. I ended up losing 80 pounds before heading off to college. And to this day, this is still the most cathartic experience I've ever had in my life, to be pushing on that rock for so long and to finally have it move that way. And for a long time, I would tell people, when they would ask me what the secret is, I would say, oh, perseverance. Perseverance is a secret, which is true because I had to persevere. But in retrospect, so many years later, I started to realize that my stress levels went way down that final semester in school. I was ahead on academic credits. I was only going to half days in school. I was already accepted to college. And I think for whatever reason, maybe because we were just getting older, my peers weren't messing with me as much. And so suddenly, what had initially caused me to eat so much? Stress, right? Suddenly, like, I had never conceived of a time where I wouldn't be stressed out. Because I'm 17, it's the year 2000. I don't know anything about stress eating or emotional eating or self-medicating. All I know is I got to work out and I got to try to change the way I eat, right? And so I'm just barreling ahead with that. And suddenly, it was like stepping into, it was like the sun was a different color all of a sudden. And I had the willpower to access in my mind to be able to change these habits. And so one of the reasons that I use that phrase, if it's worth having, it's worth fighting for, is because the worth having part does not suggest that it's not a suggestion of never quit or never give up, or if you believe you'll achieve it. That's not the suggestion. The suggestion is, if it's meaningful to you, I think personally you should keep going, because there is no guarantee in life. If I set a goal and I just keep going after it, there's no guarantee that I'll achieve it. But I think what's often hard to understand is that in the middle of these difficult circumstances, what we are developing in terms of character, there's also just understanding time. At that time, 7 years in, when I started losing the weight, I didn't know what was actually happening. I just knew I was changing. And this is why I'm telling people persevere. But I'm 43 now. I started working out when I was 10. So how many years is that working out? 33, right? In 33 years of working out, y'all, like, there are just patterns that I see that other people don't see. Most people know about strength training or cardio or like you should get the processed foods out of your diet. Like these ideas, most people know these things. But because I've been working on that problem for 33 years, there are nuanced things that I understand that other people don't understand. Oh, you just had a kid. Oh, you're trying to start a business. Oh, you got some stress at work, et cetera, et cetera. Like I can predict where people are going to have trouble when we start talking about health stuff because I've just been working on it for so long. Does that make sense? So in a real way, pushing through something that's meaningful to you allows you to keep time on the thing, and that time offers you the opportunity to learn in ways that you wouldn't have had you just, I got there 3 months, I didn't see what I wanted, I gave up. 3 years, I didn't see what I wanted, I gave up. But like when you spend a decade, 2 decades on something, there's just different things you learn. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. But here's the kicker. Okay, here's the thing. And I use that, I like this phrase, if it's worth having. How do you know it's worth having? And that's where the second principle comes into play. Understand your story. So the first principle relates to our actions, but now we're going to get into our beliefs. And just like I say on the handout, when I use the word story, what I mean is facts tied together through assumptions into a coherent narrative about how the world, everything, how the world works. So every single one of us, I believe, has a story about kind of like how life is supposed to work. And the important words here are facts and assumptions. Now, that word assumptions is important because right up under principle number 2, I say our actions come from our beliefs even when we don't know what we believe in. So, the word assumptions and the word beliefs can be used interchangeably in this definition. So, assumptions can be what sometimes? Wrong. I didn't even have to tell you that. You knew, right? So, if assumptions can be swapped out for beliefs, then beliefs can be what? Wrong, right? And our actions come from our beliefs even when we don't know what we believe in. So, to help you understand where I first started to learn about this, we have to go to my time in college and just after college. So I go off to the University of Houston in 2000 after losing all this weight. Life's great and wonderful because I just lost all this weight. And I'm never going to have any more problems again because I just lost all this weight. I'm the man now, right? Not so much, right? So I go through college. College is really hard. I major in electrical engineering. And I get a degree in May of 2005. I graduate with honors with a degree in electrical engineering. And I get a job working for an oil company there in Houston, Texas, Shell Oil Company. I'm making $60 grand a year. I'm a first generation college student. My parents, both born in 1950, grew up in the Deep South. How do my parents feel when I get this degree and I get this job? How do they feel? Proud. I made it, right. You're right. That, like, they're so proud. Like, I am on my way to the American dream, right? But here's the irony. On graduation day, it was May 13th, 2005. I still remember. I wasn't happy. It was more like I was relieved. I was just relieved that school was over. Because the reality is even though I did well in school and I always worked hard at school, I hated school the entire time I went. Hated it the whole time. Absolutely hated it. And it wasn't just like the bullying. The primary reason, and this isn't against school or against college. The primary reason I hated school is because I was never studying anything that I was interested in a way that I was interested in. The entire time I was in college, I had this thing in the back of my head. Man, I really want to major in exercise science. I really want to go into kinesiology. But I never changed my major. And the key to understanding this second principle has to deal with why I never changed my major. Now, in the book, I talk about our stories having 3 different origins. There's like broader societal narratives, and I already mentioned one, like the American dream. To me, that's a cultural story that we have here in America, okay? And then there's like there's your family of origin and the close relationships you have with people, like your spouses, significant others, parents, etc., the home you grow up in. We adopt beliefs from one another, even when we don't realize it. I'm not going to go super deep into those because the last origin, which is the self, is I think the most important. And when I say the self, I mean like kind of your psychological makeup, which is kind of something you realize with time, but also there are your experiences and how your experiences shape your view of the world. And so if we go back to my engineering experience, when I started working a couple months after graduation, I started working in like July of 2005, probably by October, November timeframe, I'm starting to feel like this dark cloud kind of descend on my mind and my emotions. It's the first time in my life I felt this way, even though I'd been through so many hard things already. I just was sad, and I was getting more and more sad every day. And when I started to talk to people close to me, particularly my parents and my girlfriend at the time, about how I was feeling emotionally and mentally after securing this good job, what kind of responses do you think they gave me when I told them like, it's Patty, like I'm not happy? What are some of the responses y'all think maybe I heard during that time? You're kidding? Okay. What else?
You're not humble.
You're not humble? Okay. What else?
Damn mind, Travis.
Yeah, you out of your damn mind. What do you think you're doing, boy? So some big ones for me, I don't know, for some reason, the one that sticks out in my head all the time is, Travis, do you know how many people wish they had a good job like that? Like all the time. And so the longer I stayed at the job, these conversations just got more and more contentious. But I also got sadder. And about 9-10 months into working at Shell, I had gained about 30 pounds because I was eating fast food every day. Because I was doing what? I was self-medicating again like I had learned as a kid because I didn't feel good. And then I started to wake up every day with this tension in my chest. And originally I thought like, man, am I getting ready to have a heart attack? Later I learned that I was having mild anxiety attacks every morning. And then probably at about month 10, I started to have these daydreams going to work where I would kind of just slip my car up under an 18-wheeler, or maybe I'll just drive off this overpass. And when I started doing that for about 2 weeks, I said to myself, like, okay, man, like you got to make some hard decisions here. Because I had my student loans and I had a car loan. So I knew if I quit the job, my financial situation would probably be in peril. But if I stayed, I was afraid of where my mental and physical health was starting to go, especially after I had lost all that weight. So I quit. And almost immediately, probably within like 2 or 3 months, I lost like 30 pounds because I started working out and eating right again. And I was just generally happier. But I still got my family, of course, my friends, and my girlfriend at the time in my life. And while they can't stop me from quitting, they can definitely cut me with their words, right? Deep. And in particular, the woman I was dating at the time, this is not Lauren. She's very different. The woman I was dating at the time, I've never been cut so deep by somebody's words. And just the insinuation that I was foolish and that I was lazy. And I can remember it was this weird dichotomy because on the one hand, I was starting to do some personal training and look into some other jobs in fitness. And whenever I was doing that, my head was clear. But as soon as I got around the people close to me in my life, and how are you going to pay for this? How are you going to pay for that? Like almost like people would ask me about money like I didn't understand math. I have an engineering degree. I understand math really well. I know what my situation is. It would be nice if I got some support, but they weren't supporting. And furthermore, it was like the critique that was just starting to weigh hard on me mentally. And like I said, whenever I distanced from them, I felt better. But when I was around them, it was like this tension I would feel. So it was like I was wedged in between like wanting to be around the people I love, but also wanting to do what I wanted to do. And so as I'm going through this turmoil, I decide to hustle up real hard one day and get another job as an engineer. This is maybe about a year later. But here's what I want to ask you all. When I quit the engineering job, I'm 23, 24 years old. Okay, I have an engineering degree. I got back in shape pretty quickly. What other jobs could I have done? What other jobs could I have done besides being an engineer?
Personal fitness.
So there's fitness. What else? What else? What other jobs maybe involve being active?
Drove battery.
Well, what about firefighter? What about, I mean, eventually I'm going to join the military, but we'll talk about that. Or police officer, or the FBI. Like, there are all these other jobs that I'm clearly qualified and capable of doing. Surveyor. My wife likes that one. There are all these other things, because what I kept telling my folks, and I would kind of say it timidly, like, well, I don't like going to the office. And I don't like the desk, and I don't like being behind the computer, which I didn't know what we know now about me, right, Patty? Like, I didn't know those things then. I just knew I didn't like going to that office every day. It felt like I was like a caged animal when I'd go there. And including me, no one else even thinks of another alternative. Everybody is committed emotionally to this belief that when I was an engineer, I had success. And I shouldn't let it go because I've got the golden ticket. Don't let it go, Travis. Here's the irony. Nobody in my life is an engineer. I'm the only one that's actually been an engineer and knows what it's like every day. But I can't see myself, because of something that I'm going to reveal here in a moment. They can't see me because they're obsessed with this idea of what success is supposed to be. So they can't even like see the facts because there's this emotional commitment to this story. This is why understanding your story is so damn important, because I'm caught up in this whirlwind and nobody wants to think about like, well, okay, well, what is Travis like doing? Okay, but Travis also needs an income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Now, here's the problem. I can't see it either. And this is about personal responsibility. And the reason I can't see it has something to do with something I told y'all earlier. So y'all remember when I said, when I was a little kid, it was like I was walking on eggshells all the time. What was difficult for me, I did get this other job as an engineer working for CenterPoint Energy in Houston, Texas. This is a year after I quit Shell. And the first day I walked in there, I felt that heaviness in my chest, just like when I had been at Shell, just before I quit. And a couple of weeks after being on this new job, I said to myself, Travis, why are you doing this to yourself? This was a very important question. Because I knew I was getting ready to be miserable all over again, going to this office all over again. I said, Travis, why are you doing this to yourself? And so I go into my manager's office and I quit. It's like 3 weeks deep. And he's shocked. He cannot believe, we gave you this job after you went through whatever the hell you went through at this other place. I can't believe you quitting. Now look, if he's shocked, you can only imagine what my parents, oh my God, man. Like, I still remember word for word some of those conversations. And every now and again, I bring it up with my mom. Like, hey, you remember you said this, right? Okay, so, and what I couldn't understand is, why is it bothering me so much just to go be what I am? Why am I so, like, conflicted on the inside? And what I realized is that walking on eggshells around people as a kid and being so self-conscious about how I look and how are people going to talk about me, et cetera, that had come with me into adulthood. And so now, somewhere in my mind, I believed that I needed people's approval in order to know that I could be confident in my decision making. And it was just very simple. I realized, like, okay, I went down this route as an engineer, and I damn near ended up killing myself because of it. And oh, by the way, I'm also in a bunch of debt now because I've had to give up my car for repossession. I still got my student loans. I've got credit cards that went into default, into collections. And eventually I end up getting evicted from my apartment. And all total, I'm 60 grand in debt. And before I got evicted, I was in Houston, Texas at the time, and I was getting ready to take a flight to Birmingham, Alabama, where my parents were. Before I made that trip, I had I had at least like a couple weeks in that apartment before I had to vacate, where I would just come home and think about what had happened and why I had landed in this situation. Now, I wouldn't talk to anybody. I wouldn't call anybody. And to be fair to my family, like my behavior, and fair to the woman I was with at the time, to be fair to them, my behavior was erratic at the time. And you know why? Because I'm trying to please other people and please myself at the same time. And the two just aren't working. And so the parallel here, like a simple parallel, is, have you ever been arguing with somebody and then you realize that part of the reason you're arguing is because y'all have different definitions of a word that the both of you are using? You ever had that happen? So like you're assuming that we have the same understanding, but in reality, we don't. And we just haven't stopped to check in on that. And that's what was going on here. Like my parents and my family, girlfriend at the time, they all have a version of success. And then I don't even know what mine is. And this is why I say it the way I say it. Our actions come from our beliefs, even when we don't know what we believe in. The world's a big place, y'all. A narrative about how the world works. That's what a story is. The world is a big place. And a lot of times we don't know what our beliefs, expectations, assumptions are. We don't know what they are until we run into them, or until those expectations aren't met, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know that I had this subconscious thing where I need other people to approve of what I do in order to make decisions and go forward. But I found out. And now I'm 60 grand in debt. I'm getting evicted from this apartment. Everybody thinks I'm a fool. Some of them think I'm lazy. Okay. And now I got to put my life back together. And I'm 24 years old at the time. And just maybe like a year and a half prior, I was like the picture of success. And even though I know I can't be an engineer anymore, like y'all, $60,000 is a lot of money for a 24-year-old. How do I feel as I'm contemplating my financial situation? Say it.
Like a loser.
A loser.
Yeah.
Flat out. Loser. I'm not depressed anymore, but I feel like a loser. And so what I've got to figure out and what I've got to focus on is what are the facts on the ground. This is something in the military, we call this a tactical pause. Like if you get into an engagement on a battlefield with the enemy, you're in a gunfight, and maybe you're taking like overwhelming fire. Part of what you do is don't make immediate decisions. Hunker down, find some cover, and take a moment to assess the situation, assess the facts on the ground, and then try to make an intelligent decision forward. And this was kind of like a tactical pause for me in this eviction, because I'm in this apartment by myself. I'm not talking about anybody anymore. And so I need to assess kind of the facts. And this is where we get into principle number 3. Maintain a vision. Now, I don't mean like I'm not, and my wife's going to laugh, but like I'm not a wishy-washy person, y'all. I'm not a spiritual person, not against anybody being spiritual. I'm a very like logical person. So when I say vision, I don't mean like I'm not against you if you have vision boards or you have like images of things that you want. I'm not against any of that, okay? But I'm very like tactical when I think about problem solving in life. So when I say maintain a vision, all I mean by vision is a set of goals for the future, okay? That's all I mean. But there are some specific characteristics that I think are very important and that kind of come out of this situation with engineering. We're going to talk about one in depth, but the first two are holistic and realistic. So when I say holistic, what I mean by that is taking into account the totality of life. Something that they never talked about in school when I was getting ready to get out of school was like, okay, they dare not say, what happens if you get this degree and you hate the job? What do you do? Okay, you want to change jobs. Let's say a year or two after you get the degree, you get the engineering degree. How much money do you need to have saved up to go experiment with something else? Do you have student loans? What are you majoring in? English? How long? And nothing against that, but do you know how long it's going to take to pay off those loans? And what kind of job are you going to be able to get to facilitate paying off those loans? Like tactical, real tactical. And I got real tactical when I was getting evicted from that apartment. I was like, okay, I cannot go back to an office. Can't do it. That's not going to work. I need something that's more aggressive and physically oriented, but I also still want mental challenges. Okay, and I need to pay off this debt. And I also wanted a sense of purpose in whatever it was I was going to pick up and do. And so it's 2007. What's happening in 2007? Two wars, right? And I'm in this apartment like, I'm like, maybe like being a medic on the battlefield would like be a good idea. And so I think about it, and so realistic. When I say realistic, what we want to try to do is imagine the worst case scenario. I had just not done that with engineering. I'm not going to make that mistake twice. And so as I thought about the military, I thought about, okay, like, what if you get captured on the battlefield? What if you get tortured to death? Because that's happening in 2007 and throughout that war, right? And so I had to sit down for a couple of weeks and really contemplate, do you still want to do this? If that's the ultimate payment that you're going to have to make here, do you still want to do it? And everything in me still wanted to move forward. So I was like, okay, we've assessed the ramifications, the ultimate cost here. And so now the last piece is bold. And what I mean by bold is choosing things that give you some sense of trepidation. Not so hard that they're like impossible, but not so easy that you know you can hit that target. And so for me, when I went to the recruiter to say, hey, I want to sign up for the military, he offered me something. He said, have you ever thought about going special forces or becoming a Green Beret? And my initial thought was the imperative in special operations in the military, there's an imperative that's common across all the services. Well, there are a lot of things that are the same, but for me in particular, the reason I didn't go to the Navy office is because I don't know how to swim at the time. And so I says, hey man, like to be a Green Beret, don't you need to know how to swim? And he tells me an important piece of information. He says, they will teach you how to swim, Brent, Derek, Rick. They'll teach you how to swim, Justin, in basic training. When you go to basic training at Fort Benning, they'll teach you how to swim. I was like, bet, okay, let's do it. All right, they'll teach me how to swim, okay? Now halfway through,
Make sure to stay light to you, buddy.
hey, halfway through, you stole what I was gonna say, Derek. You stole what I was gonna say. Halfway through basic training, I figure out this is a tactic. Not all recruiters, I want to be clear, I'm not saying all recruiters do this. Okay, I'm not saying all recruiters do this. This was a tactic at the time, because in particular, when you trial for special forces, if you fail out of the training, then you still go to an infantry unit or a combat unit. And they were in need of combat soldiers. Now, here's the deal. When I figure out that I've been lied to, how do I feel? Betrayed, taken advantage of. Guess what, y'all? Because I spent some time thinking about the worst case scenario, I was like, cool. He lied. Whatever. Because, like, I'm not dead. I'm not being tortured. Now, here's the deal, though. I am terrified of the water at this point in my life. Maybe still am to some extent. And the deepest water I've ever been in my life, maybe waist high, chest high, something like that. But in my head, when I realized, like, okay, I've been lied to, how do we solve? I immediately go tactical. How do we solve this problem? Well, there are books. I can watch videos. There's a pool on every base, and I'm going through Special Forces assessment and selection. I will meet other people who know how to swim. And I met somebody who knew how to swim. His name was Sergeant Smith. That's not his real name, but to protect his privacy. Sergeant Smith was he was combat diver qualified in the Army. So what that means is he was as competent in the water as a U.S. Navy SEAL. And he was getting ready to go from Fort Benning, Georgia, out to North Carolina, where all the Special Forces training takes place. And he found out that I didn't know how to swim. And he says, okay, Travis, I want you to meet me at the pool on base at this time. We'll do some work. So I show up at the pool, and I bring a buddy with me that I'd gone through basic training with as moral support. I bring a buddy with me for moral support. Now, Sergeant Smith, I show up at the pool, and Sergeant Smith, he walks into the pool area. And he's walking alongside the pool, and there's a gray locker on the side of the pool. He opens up the gray locker, and he pulls out this blue brick. He throws it in the deep end of the pool. How deep is the deep end of the pool?
20 feet.
15. The deep end of the pool is 15. I don't think they have them that deep anymore on military bases. I think that's something they changed at some point in the 2010s. But it was 15 feet deep. How do I feel? I've been asking that question all night. Terrified. My stomach felt like it had jumped up into my throat because I knew what he was about to ask me to do. And so he turned around and he looked at me, with like this smirk on his face, He says, Daigle, we don't have time to take you back to the kiddie pool as a little kid and just kind of gradually work your way up. Like, we got to go real far, real fast. And he says, right now, you are afraid of the water, and we have to break that fear. He says, this is just a confidence exercise. He says, all you're going to do is you're going to dive in the pool head first, and you're going to dive with your hands clasped above head like a spear. He says, you'll float all the way down. You grab the brick, squat off the bottom, press off. You'll float up, and you'll put it on the side of the pool. We'll be done for the day. And when he explained it all, like, I listened, but I'm still terrified. So I turned to the wall on the side of the pool, trying to like gather myself and get myself together and settle myself down. And so I calculated, I've got my buddy there, I've got Sergeant Smith there, and I've got the lifeguard there. And there's some other people just enjoying normal stuff at the pool. I figured, like, if I go in and something goes wrong, somebody can come get me. But I still needed some help. And so I thought deeper. And so the first person I thought about was that lion-ass recruiter. And so that brought up some energy for me. And then I thought about the conversations that I had with friends and family members when I quit engineering and before I joined the military. You're lazy, you're foolish, worst mistake of your life. And that gave me a little bit more fuel. And then I thought about my classmates growing up, calling me stupid, fat, ugly, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought in the back of my head, man, like, what kind of story would it be to tell to go from that to a U.S. Army Green Beret? And that gave me like this crazy like focus in that moment. And so I turned around and all I could think about was what Sergeant Smith said. And I just dove off the side, just like he said, hands clasped above head, floated down, got the brick, squat off the bottom, press up, just like he said, floated to the top, put the brick on deck, got out of the pool. This is the closest thing to that cathartic transformation experience that I've ever had in my life from when I was a kid. And later on, it was funny, I talked to Sergeant Smith because he was in the medic course with me in North Carolina when we were going through the course. Because everything after that moment was easy at that point. I mean, we still had a whole lot to do. Because I had never been camping before, never hiked before, never shot a gun before the Army, let alone knowing how to swim. So there was still a lot of hard challenges, but that was the thing I was most afraid of. And when I talked to Sergeant Smith during the course, I reminded him of that day, and he goes, man, I didn't know what I was going to do with you. Like, I had no idea what I was going to do with you that day, and I know how you were going to react. I just made that up on the spot. I figured like, hey, like if he doesn't dive in, like, hey, no harm, no foul, right? And you know, and we laughed about that, but like I ended up doing a lot of stuff. You know, I got my Green Beret, I deployed to Afghanistan, I paid off all my debt while I was in the military, jumped out of airplanes, got in a gunfight while I was overseas, heard bullets whiz by my head. Till this day, that story about the pool is my favorite story to tell people. And mind you, I still don't know how to swim. Like when we do that, I still don't know how to swim after I get out of the pool. I still got to figure out swimming, and I still almost drowned a couple times during that 2-year process of training. But the reason that's such a profound story is part of the reason it's important to set like goals that push you is that day after the pool caused me to see myself in a different way. And that energy that I was talking about, that I was feeling come up. When I left the military, what I figured out, I left the military as a calmer man than when I entered the military, which is, of course, a great irony in this day and age, because we talk a lot about veterans having PTSD. And I realized I was calmer. And when I asked myself why, what I realized is I had PTSD from my childhood that I'd been suppressing for years, and anger and rage. I don't like using that word, but it's honestly it's one of the best words I can come up with, that I was pushing down for years. And the military gave me a, quote, safe place to let a lot of that energy out for the first time. And it allowed me to see myself in a different way. And I think the reason it's important to push towards hard goals, again, with those characteristics in mind, is because when you don't learn, I feel like you don't learn yourself unless you come up against something hard. And unbeknownst to me, I had learned that as a little kid trying to lose weight. I learned that in engineering, and then it got reinforced going through Green Beret training. And the reason I think this is the most important skill in life is because in each situation, I ask you all a question: how do I feel, right? And there is a temptation to give in to what I feel in the moment, to cause me to deviate. If I'd have given in as a little kid, who knows? Maybe I'm still, over 300 pounds, right? If I'd have given in to how I felt when I was an engineer, particularly if I'd have given in to the need to have approval from other people, I may have continued to self-medicate with more extreme methods, and who knows where my mental health would have been. In the military, there's that moment where I figured out I've been lied to, but I'm able to temper my emotions with the fact that I've already dealt with the worst case scenario. So I'm just going to problem solve. I'm just going to use my experiences to my advantage and push forward. And the reason I think this is so important is because if we don't learn how to manage our emotions and be able to see through our emotions, self-destructive, antisocial behaviors. Now, it's obvious why that's bad for us as individuals, but again, antisocial, the bitterness, the resentment that I could have towards my family, towards society, et cetera, but instead just recognizing that like life is filled with suffering. Maybe that's not the most positive outlook, but I think it's very true. Life is filled with suffering. And it's cliche, but it's important. It's not that gets easier. You just get what? Tougher, stronger, et cetera. And I think that's why personal ownership, or taking responsibility for our actions, beliefs, directions in life, is the most important skill in life. That's all I got, folks. Does anybody have any questions? We got about 8 minutes till 7 o'clock.
I thought it was interesting. You kept asking us how you felt
Yeah.
during those times, but it seems like the overall theme is the action that you put into those things despite the feeling.
Yes. Yeah.
You didn't ask us what did you do in those situations. You asked us how you felt.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So notice that like all of you were able to call out the feelings, right? That's because like we don't have to have the same exact experiences to know what situations would make us feel like. And so the point of asking you that is to, one, let you know, like to kind of make you one of the things I've spent a lot of time doing as I've been doing this work, I've been doing this for like since 2015, is trying to get people to develop the ability to get outside of themselves and see themselves. So like in this space, using me as an example, you can see like, oh, you're angry. Oh, you're frustrated right there. Oh, you're sad right there. Because you know these things. But like the hard part is like when you're in it and you're experiencing that turmoil, that turmoil yourself, like our emotions can be so blinding. And the tactic or the strategy here is the more you use this skill, because a lot of times people say like, this person needs to take responsibility. The ultimate example I think of is if somebody is in the middle of like alcoholism, right? And somebody says, take responsibility. Like, I don't know, they lost their wife, a child, lost a job, et cetera, et cetera. Like life is destroyed. And so it's so hard in that moment to hear, take responsibility. What does that mean? And if somebody teaches this to me as a skill ahead of time, maybe I'm able to get ahead of those emotions and be able to still myself and see. And that's the point of asking, like, how do I feel? Because you all know, like you've had your own problems and you know how you feel. And we know how sometimes we fall short of who we want to be in those moments. Does that make sense, Luke?
You said that you are trying to help people develop the skill of observing objectively outwardly. Do you have a program, like a coaching? That you, like, are you willing to take on clients, or how do you do this?
I am trying to figure out how to put that together. I'm a pretty good communicator, but the whole task of coaching is still complex to me. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm working on it. Yep. Any other questions?
Just out of curiosity I feel like you kind of did it on your own, but out of curiosity, have you dug into cognitive behavioral therapy or not?
I have. I've not super deep, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's right up.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, because it's been a long time since I read the definition, Rolly, it's more about almost like, is it similar to like exposure therapy where it's all action oriented?
It's more so just like having paradigm shifts on how, like you said, everybody has
A story?
beliefs,
Yeah.
a belief on how the world works, and so cognitive behavioral therapy helps you kind of work backwards. And if you feel like everybody's against you, we all learn, hopefully, at some point in life, everybody really isn't against you, but like people have to work through that.
Right.
Through cognitive behavioral therapy, you like have a paradigm shift on how you process things. But I've got 2 books on it. They're workbooks. I'll let you borrow one at the gym because it's really like you did a lot of that yourself.
Yeah.
I'm no expert on it, but it's been something that's been beneficial for me.
Let me get Patty here first.
Okay. Tell us a little bit, like update us. You left us off at the Green Beret,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a snippet of then, and then what thing are you chasing now?
So after I got out of the military in 2012, kind of quick summary, I started working as a personal trainer because that's what I wanted to do. Now I paid off all the debt and I also saved $60,000 before I left the military because again, tactical, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make sure that I can take care of myself while I'm trying this personal training thing. And what I realized with personal training, as I would work with clients is kind of going back to something I said in the beginning, is I can know all the diets and workouts in the world. But if you don't make the choice to show up and follow through, like it doesn't matter. If you don't come, like Derek, I'm sure has experienced this with people plenty of times. Derek's a chiropractor. Like I can tell you what to do to begin getting out of pain, but if you don't do it, it doesn't matter. And so I started to see this, and then I also started to realize like, oh, like this client, you hate your job. So when I tell you to put the potato chips down, I know why you can't put the potato chips down. Oh, this client over here, you're having financial trouble at home. You hate your marriage. You're struggling with your kids. Like, And so I also realized like there's more here that I think I can address with people. And that's what got me into speaking. Now I did that for 5 years up in Tacoma. And then the pandemic hit. And like I had some major gigs scheduled, but then I also met my wife. She moved down here to Little Rock. And I was supposed to start up speaking again right away, but I've been going through some of my own transformation and counseling that we've talked about, just because how would I describe it quickly? People close to me up in Tacoma, and I don't want to blame Washington for this, but some people close to me at the time, folks, you'd be surprised how cynical people are. And when you say you're a motivational speaker, without even knowing, without having heard you or knowing your story, how much people think that's like whimsy and silly without even understanding it. And so I just had a lot of difficult experiences with people close to me that disappointed me, and are not, like I said, this is unique for me to have this many people I know come and support me in doing this. This is actually a really unique thing, and I really appreciate everybody being here. Rick?
I'm glad you did this. This is totally awesome. My question is, I think you have it, like, can you open up how you deal with stress shock phenomenon?
Say that again?
Stress shock phenomenon. Like fear, flight, all of that, the different modes you go through.
Yeah.
Black, orange.
So this is something I think about a lot, because I feel like, fortunately and unfortunately, like the experiences I went through as a kid got me used to, how would I say, there was lots of shock moments of like, oh, I'm being embarrassed in front of the whole school, or oh, I'm experiencing this physical abuse from this person that I love. In the negative, part of what that does is make you emotionally numb in certain ways. And I think my wife would agree with this. I think I have an emotional delay with a lot of things. So things don't hit me as hard right away. Now the positive of that I try to take away from it is it allows me to kind of see something happening and not knee-jerk respond to it and slow down. And that's proven to be helpful in a lot of situations. Like, Rolly, when we talk about like unwinding beliefs, like when I'm talking with coworkers who have different cultural beliefs or different political beliefs, I've noticed my ability to like be a lot slower and inquisitive with people before like snapping a judgment. And I think that comes from that experience. But the problem is like, do you need to get abused and go through all these things in order to have that ability? I hope not. I certainly hope not. And I think some of these tools that I offer, I think can help address some of that.
Do you feel like being a special forces, you think that helped develop some of that delayed reaction?
For sure. Just going through, you spend so much time in the military, like going over potential combat scenarios and kind of taking your brain to a place before you actually get there, that it helps you train the right responses. And so I think that reminds me of one of the things that I think has been extremely helpful for me, because I actually didn't start going to counseling about my childhood until maybe a couple of years ago. And up until that point, I had kind of gone through life feeling like, hey, I've done a lot, I've accomplished a lot, I'm good. But I started going to counseling, and a lot of the encouragement came from my wife. But I think one of the things that has helped me over these years is writing. Writing about your experience, and you don't have to publish it to the internet like I do, but writing about, trying to articulate to yourself and make sense out of the hard things that have happened to you in life. This is something in my former coaching relationships, Derek, that I have not been able to get people to do, but it's something that I'm going to hold people's feet to the fire to do if I do it with them again. It's like, you give me 1,000 words on that thing that happened with your dad when you were young and the result of it. Like making yourself write is very powerful in sorting out your beliefs. Why do I think everybody is against me? Because I've certainly had that belief before. I know it's unreasonable. Through writing, I've been able to unwind a lot of that. And so I think that's something that helps us get objective and develop sort of that slow to judgment, slow to reaction.
Yeah, where do I put my credit card?
I'll call you and let you know.
I think that was gonna be my last question, is how do people reach you?
I have, so you see my website at the bottom of that handout, travisdaigle.com. You can find my email address there. Also, I have business cards with my phone number. And also, y'all, like, it would be really helpful if you are on YouTube or Instagram or you listen to podcasts. I have a podcast on Spotify. I'm on Instagram at Travis Daigle. And I'm also on YouTube at Travis Daigle as well. And I also write a blog that I put out a couple times a month. You can go subscribe by email. It'll come to your inbox. That would also be a great way to help. The more people know, the better it is for me. Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much.